almost ready. I think there are a few seconds to go.
That's good.
And I will ask Anne to introduce you, and then the questions we agreed.
Yes, perfect.
Almost ready, I think, few seconds, yes. Dear colleagues, welcome to our monthly dialogue. I remind you that dialogues are live streamed, they're free. Importantly, they're very interactive. Please ask questions. The dialogues have become so popular because they are a nice link between authors, reviewers, editors, and readers. And as you know, we have a monthly dialogue, which is on the last Thursday of each month. So welcome to the May dialogue, which will be really very, very interesting. It is indeed now my privilege to ask Anne Tybjærg, who is executive editor of the European Heart Journal, to introduce the important guest we have today, Karen Sliwa, who is co-editor of the journal. And the title of the dialogue will be is Cardiovascular Disease in Africa, Challenges and Opportunities. And please, can you introduce Karen so we can start officially our dialogue?
Thank you very much, Filippo. Professor Karen Sliwa is a senior cardiologist working at the Division of Cardiology, Department of Medicine at Groote Schuur Hospital, University of Cape Town, at a UCT private academic hospital. Her special areas of expertise are heart failure, structural heart diseases such as cardiomyopathy, and cardiac disease in pregnancy. She is also the director of the Cape Heart Institute Faculty of Heart Sciences, University of Cape Town, which is a translational cardiovascular research institute with 7 working groups. Professor Sliwa is widely recognized as a world expert in cardiovascular diseases with a special interest in reducing mortality in women with cardiac disease in maternity. She has contributed to better understanding on the pathophysiology, the treatment options, and awareness of peripartum cardiomyopathy, a global disease particularly prevalent in African populations. She led and still leads several inter-Africa and global research projects, which have had a major impact for creating knowledge about cardiovascular diseases common in Africa and other middle to lower income regions, and leading to changes in policy. Her considerable experience is setting up simple, cost-effective registries and web-based data entry platforms have had a major impact on planning several innovative research projects and has facilitated the training of physicians from several African countries, including Mozambique, Nigeria, Cameroon, Uganda, and Tanzania. Her translational research from bench to bedside to population studies have led to a much better understanding of cardiovascular diseases such as rheumatic heart disease and heart failure due to various causes, and subsequently to improve patient care. She holds numerous awards. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I'll say that among these are the European Cardiac Society Jeffrey Rose Award for Population Sciences in 2019. And her work is also highly cited. She has more than 400 publications and an H index of around 90. Very impressive. Professor Sliwa leads several high-profile special interest groups, and she's the past president of the World Heart Federation from 2019 to 2020, and is currently a board member and the treasurer of the Pan-African Society of Cardiology. So, Karen, let's start up with a more personal question. You were born in Germany and then you moved to South Africa. Did your passion for medicine start in Germany or did it start in South Africa?
Oh, no, it clearly started in South Africa, or also before, because I traveled a lot before. I mean, I didn't really like my studying medicine. I mean, the 6 years studying medicine in Berlin, I did not enjoy a lot. I mean, I didn't enjoy it all. I can really say it like that, because it was, it's a very big medical school and to some extent anonymous. I mean, you're not really talk to any professors, big classes. So I almost was ready to give up year 4 because I really disliked it so much. But then I did elective in a number of countries like India, Philippines, did the year of doctor thesis in Israel, and then came to the Tropical Disease Institute in Berlin. And when I came to South Africa, I mean, I really loved medicine, enjoyed seeing patients, and yeah, my passion clearly was starting outside of Germany. Yes.
So I mean, I think many medical students can concur on this, right? That maybe medical school was not so interesting, but it became interesting afterwards, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So why did you leave Germany for South Africa?
Yeah, the reason is I always I know it sounds bizarre. I'm a cardiologist, as you know. So, but my big love is really for infectious diseases. And in my doctoral thesis was about 2 protozoal disease, leishmaniasis and cerebral malaria. Then I worked 2 years in Berlin at the Tropical Disease Institute. But then I felt I don't really only want to do the research, so I want to see patients. And then I applied with my husband at that time, and a daughter was 9 months, virtually all over the place. And the city where we both had a job was then Johannesburg. And there we went, 2 suitcases and a baby. And that's why I came to South Africa. Not much planning, virtually by chance.
Impressive. So what started your interest in cardiology?
Yeah, so my CV is clearly not straightforward, and so I changed my ideas many times. So I first studied medicine, then I did tropical medicine. Then I wanted initially, when I was then in Johannesburg in Baragwanath Hospital, which is a huge hospital with 3,000 beds, I wanted to be actually a specialist GP. So I did a year of medicine, a year of trauma surgery, ICU. And when I was almost done with this 4 years training, the last year was again in internal medicine. Then I thought, internal medicine is perhaps not bad. And I actually wanted to specialize in infectious diseases, but in South Africa didn't offer infectious diseases at that time. Everything was infectious diseases. There was no need to have a specialist for infectious diseases. With this large HIV pandemic, tuberculosis, malaria, I mean, they didn't create a specialist for infectious diseases. And my worst subject was actually cardiology. So I thought I better spend my last year of my training in cardiology, otherwise I will never pass my internal medicine exam. And while I was then in cardiology, I thought, actually quite interesting. And I started also my PhD that year, my last year of the internal medicine training. I started my PhD in a cardiologist area, peripartum cardiomyopathy. And while I was doing my PhD, I thought I can actually be also a cardiologist. And then that's how I became a cardiologist. Not very straightforward, not always logic, but that's how I did it.
I like that. One of your first publications was a trial in the Lancet on the effects of pentoxifillin in heart failure. Was heart failure your first scientific passion?
No. It also had, it started because my doctors, I just need a minute to explain. So in my doctoral thesis was on 2 protozoa disease. So leishmaniasis and cerebral malaria. as you might remember from your medical school, it's in your body and leads to a chronic infection where the body can't get rid of the protozoa. I found that totally fascinating, how something can evade your immune mechanism. So I started to be really interested in inflammation and immune activation, the cytokine cascade. And in my doctor's thesis, I actually found out that prostacyclin and pentoxifillin are inhibiting TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha, which is a cytokine. And that led to a patent with Bayer Sharing. So my doctoral thesis was quite successful. Then I read, when I was still a fellow in medicine, and that was in the mid-90s. So at that time, the research came out by Professor Douglas Mann and other colleagues that tumor necrosis factor alpha, so that the cytokines have a role in heart failure and inflammation. You might remember that. So with my own research interest in immune activation, inflammation, I obviously then thought perhaps pentoxifillin could have an effect in heart failure. So I joined basically heart failure via my scientific interest of inhibiting inflammation and the cytokine cascade. At that time, it was not known that TNF is triggering or interlinked with other cytokines like interleukin-6, IL-10. That only came out, and that actually led to my publication in The Lancet I was still a fellow in cardiology at that time, and ongoing research in the field. And then obviously I became interested in heart failure, which is a very, very common problem in entire Africa, because cardiac disease is managed late, poorly. So we have many, many patients with heart failure.
So you were ahead of the times, right? I can hear. What in your own opinion has been your greatest scientific achievement?
I think there are two different fields which I did in parallel. So the one is clearly peripartum cardiomyopathy. And that started because I have two children, and when they were small, I needed a nanny. And the nanny, with the name Ottilia, she had peripartum cardiomyopathy. So I started researching the disease and eventually did my PhD on that. And from first describing the disease to better understanding the pathogenesis, then to work with Professor Denise Sylvia Kleinert on dissecting really more details the pathways with a number of publications that field, later founding the PPCM Heart Failure Association Working Group, initiating the PPCM ERP Global Registry, and I still work on that field. So that's clearly one area where despite I've done a lot of other things in the meantime, I keep going. I think there's still things which needs to be explored, and I find it a very interesting and a common condition. So that's my one area. And the other one is, is heart failure. And it started with, and actually population studies. And it started actually by, like most other doctors, I had no clue about a population study. I mean, you learn about one patient, one disease. You don't think, I'm not a public health expert. You don't think about populations. But how it came, I had two Australians visiting me. It was Professor David Wilkinson and Professor Simon Stewart, and they visited me at Cresani Baragwanath Hospital, and then, which is a hospital with 3,300 beds, a clinic which at that time saw more than 100 new patients a day. And they asked me, so Karen, what do you see here? And I said, I'm not sure, I'm seeing patients. So then we actually decided to map out a study which is called the Heart of Soweto study, and was eventually included more than 8,000 patients over a period of 3 years, which all came to this single clinic, consecutive patients. And it really, the study taught me a lot. First, when I started the study, it was impossible to get funding for the study. People said, so who wants to know about heart disease in Soweto? I mean, people didn't think that's interesting. Then I was not famous. No funder wanted to give me any money. I tried everywhere, but eventually I found a company which is producing oats, food in Africa. So a total outsider who gave really substantial money to, because we had to rebuild the clinics, I had to employ nurses, you know, to count everyone walking in one door and exiting via the other door, and 8,000 people is a lot of people. So you need staff, you need the setup for that. And I was clearly not an expert in that. So I had to restructure the clinic. There were many things that didn't work. First, you wanted to be fancy and upload everything. What was it? BlackBerry at the time failed. Then we had to train the nurses to enter the data, but somehow the computer blacked out, so all data were gone. So it was, but I learned a lot. You learn a lot by failing. So I learned in this study that failure is not something why you should get up. It just helps you to think in a different pathway. So the study was important for me because obviously it published well, and I think it opens the door for many other people from Africa to publish local data. But for me personally, it was important because I learned that you just don't give up. You find another way of doing it, and you just move forward. So these are my two areas, the Heart of Soweto study and all the studies that followed, and peripartum cardiomyopathy, and then my bigger interest in heart disease and pregnancy.
Thank you.
Well, Karen, let me ask our colleagues first to ask questions. This is really a good opportunity to meet you and ask you questions. So please, dear colleagues, this is a dialogue, it's very interactive, ask questions. And I have another question for you. In addition to your successful story as a scientist and as a cardiologist, as we have heard, and congratulations for your spectacular CV.
Thank you.
Important scientific achievements, but you are multitask. In addition to be a scientist, also you devoted considerable efforts in developing cardiovascular medicine in Africa. How did this start? What triggered your interest in this regard?
I think, I mean, South Africa or Africa is really a fantastic place to do research. First, so many things are not known. And if you are a curious person, I mean, and you can ask a proper research question and come up with a reasonable methodology, you will be able to publish the data well, but also make a difference. I mean, you can make a real difference in your own lifetime. And I really thought, why are there so few people doing that? And it is also that people need help. I mean, they need mentors, they need connections. With connections, I mean, you know, when you are in, let's say, you're in Italy and Berlin, and you are a junior researcher, and you will find somebody who can help you a bit, reading your paper critically, telling you the methodology is not good, helping you how you format the paper, how you upload the paper. In Africa, this is very difficult. I mean, there are really very hardworking, enthusiastic clinician researchers, but that time, about 20 years ago, they really worked totally in isolation. And I thought via smaller societies, you can build this network, work together, and together you are always stronger. So that was really my motive to start engaging with South African Heart, SA Heart, that's how it's called, was the Southern Heart Association at that time. Then to form the first heart failure society in Africa, I think it was the first one, and to bring like-minded people together, and obviously later also very much to mentor and promote others.
Thank you. And indeed, you were the founder in 2005 of the South Africa Heart Failure Society. How did all this start? And was this limited to South Africa, or went also beyond South Africa to other African countries?
Yes. Yeah, so how it started, again, quite opportunistic. So I had actually, there was a meeting, it was organized by the company Servia, and there was John McMurray and Professor Alex Mebaza were speakers. And Professor John McMurray was the president of the Heart Failure Association and of the EHJ Heart Failure Association at that time. And I just walked to the both of them and said, I think we in South Africa need also a heart failure society, and can you help me? And then I'm still know them, I'm still in contact with them. I actually met Professor Mebaza 2 days ago in Madrid, and it's a heart failure meeting, and we had lunch. And so I got some tips how to do that, and that's how it started. Nothing special. You just have to move, have to try. I also never founded a society, so I went online and looked at there was an option online to find out how you find a non-profit society. So I registered online, and because you have to fundraise, so I had to find out how to fundraise, how to issue a tax certificate. I obviously didn't know that. And so that was the first. And then for Africa, so what happens then, I subsequently started to be very engaged in the Pan-African Cardiac Society. And then I formed a working group within the Pan-African Cardiac Society on heart failure, which I also led for 5 years, and now Professor Mahmoud Sani took over. And yes, that's now a very, very active working group in Africa.
Well, let me quote now the European Journal. Recently, you published on the Pan-African Society of Cardiology and its commitment to clinical research. So what do you see in your pipeline, in your crystal ball, about the future of this Pan-African society? Will you involve other countries? What are you?
Yes.
It's really a very interesting trajectory. What do you see for the future?
Yes. So now the Pan-African Cardiac Society is really going from strength to strength. It's now the president is Professor Elijah Ogola from Kenya. And most of the African countries are by now members, but the society is a little bit different to other societies. It was, one of the presidents was the late Professor Bongani Mayosi, and his vision was really that research forms practice, forms knowledge, knowledge forms practice. So the Pan-African Cardiac Society is really around jointed research, and this leads into education. So the working group within PASCA are really active, creating knowledge. And so I hope there, and I know already I see a number of my colleagues online, which is very nice. And I hope that we continued and they continue, because I also see a lot of junior colleagues, that they continue to live according to this motto, that we really need more information on cardiovascular disease from the African continent, and that they continue working together, building even stronger networks and moving the society forward.
Thank you, Karen. Before asking Anne, I'm sure she's got many more interesting questions for you. I'm reading a question from the audience, from Eva Gertz. And the question is about hypertension, which is becoming so prevalent in Africa. How can we counteract this expanding, this pandemic of hypertension in Africa?
It's quite interesting. So you have some countries who have a particularly high prevalence of hypertension, such as Nigeria, and other countries it's not as common, like let's say Mozambique. And it's not entirely clear what the reasons are for that, but altogether it's obviously linked to processed food, which was very rare 50 years ago, and unfortunately it's really changed. It's interlinked, I think, due to air pollution. And you will know that some cities like Nigeria, there will be something like 20 million in about 10 years. So we have, and then obviously lack of exercise, because the urbanization has changed, that people used to live in the countryside, they have to walk. Now they're living, like in many other parts of the world, in urban areas, and you have all sorts of transport, but the bottom line is people don't walk as much. And the noise, so you have a number of factors which will be not easy to influence, and but I think with some education, in example, the processed food and the obesity, that can to some extent by education be counterbalanced. And it's actually quite sad to see. I mean, if you go to Uganda and to the rural areas, you will see there are people still cook. They have 8 different types of bananas. They virtually, or in Mozambique, you don't see any obese people if you leave Maputo. I mean, they just no one is obese. But the people eat their own food, they still walk. And so it can be stopped, but it's very difficult because, like in many parts, it's a promotion of fast food chains. Babies, it's perceived that babies have to eat, obviously not breastfeed anymore, but processed baby food. When they're 6 months, they're supposed to eat processed baby food in glasses, which uses a lot of money for the parents, but it's very unhealthy because salt and sugar isn't. So I really think by education, one could counterbalance this, and not just tablets. One needs to start earlier.
Well, I'm afraid Africa is following the path in Europe we followed some years ago, but should teach how to correct.
Yes.
Anne, please, back to you.
Yes, so we're going to change gears a little here. You have also been very active in promoting the role of women in cardiovascular medicine, I think. So there are 3 main areas in which sex and gender-based inequities can be observed. One is authorship, obviously. Another is enrollment in trials, and a third is clinical practice. Can you share with us some of your views in these 3 settings?
Yeah, I must say, to be really honest, I mean, the years when I was in my 30s and early 40s, so when I was still a fellow, it was very difficult. I mean, there is a lot of I faced a lot of active and passive resistance in many fields where many people don't talk about, and some were pretty mean. I mean, I will not mention names, but I mean, let's say my first society meeting, I was a very proud member of the South African Heart Association, and I was told it's Saturday at 9 o'clock, and I arrived at 9 o'clock, and everyone was walking out of the door because the meeting actually started at 8. I was giving the wrong time because my colleagues were not happy that I'm the very new member. And also, there was a lot of professional jealousy when I was younger and started to had good publications, and some were vicious. And the Heart of Soweto study was actually stopped after 3 years by the head of the department at that time. He had the power to stop it, and he stopped it. And that led to the situation that I took another job offer. I had one from Australia and one from Canada, and luckily I had one from Cape Town because I wanted to stay in Africa, and that's how I came to Cape Town. And I think, unfortunately, many women are giving up. I mean, if you have really bullying, mean colleagues, many give up. And I think it helped that I had a family. I have very, very supportive husband. I had very good friends. It just helps if you go home and you're upset and you have friends who are not in the medical field, and you can go out and have whatever, talk about something else. And I learned to really get a thick skin. I mean, in the end, it's only work. In the end, they're just idiots. And it really helped me. So 10 years later, obviously you become more established, and it became more difficult to bully me. I think also people learn that I can be really nasty as well. I'm not often, but I can, and I'm feared. I know that, and which is good. So people don't try anymore. And it's a nice reputation to have because you live more peacefully. And the other thing is that, so what are the tips? You probably want to know what tips I can give. The first thing is to, competition is everywhere. Also men have competition. So I think women have to learn that competition is normal and healthy. So they mustn't take it personal if you don't get a job, or if your paper is not accepted, or if you don't go into a society. So don't take it personal. But what happens, and you try again. So just don't give up so easily. I think it's a very important tip for future females who are ambitious. And then if look, there's some competition can be nasty. So I think you have to develop a skill to be bold, but not bitter. Keep some charm. But if someone is really unpleasant, you have to put boundaries. It's a very fine line, but one can learn it. And I actually did 3 conflict resolution courses, and that really helped. I can really recommend that for anybody. Look, in business, there are skills, how to deal with conflicts. And those 3 courses made a huge difference. They made my life much more peacefully. Because you learn if someone comes with aggression, it's no point to respond with counter-aggression. It makes it just unproductive. There's a way to acknowledge your aggressor. I can't give you the whole course now, but there is a way how you can learn dealing with aggression and how you rise above it. And then there's also skills how you don't break bridges, because eventually, and I learned that, and someone later on who was really unpleasant and nasty, we were very well together, and the person apologized. And so this is a skill set you need to learn, and doesn't matter if you're male or female or whatever, these are certain skills, and one can learn them. And I think that helped me a lot, and I can only encourage women to not give up and find some good friends and move forward.
I can certainly sympathize with all this, I tell you. But let's expand a little more on this discussion. Do you think that sex and gender-based inequities are different in Western countries compared to Africa?
I must say, I think in the cardiovascular fields, Africa is now easier than the Western world, much easier. I really think that in the last 10 years, there is a big network of really strong African or in African living and female, like Anna Mokombe, Lisa Zulka, Prof. Aman Bakke from Nigeria, and many other in middle 40s women, and they're working, we work together, we assist each other, giving grants, promoting others. If I cannot do a job, I nominate them, and not just nominating them, send the whole CV and why they're so brilliant. And we work very, very well together. And I don't see that in Europe so much. So I actually think we have less barriers in Africa than, unfortunately, what I still see in Europe.
Anna, you plan to go to Africa from Denmark now?
So, another important area is leadership in cardiovascular medicine. Do you think that sex and gender-based inequities are present also in this regard? Or is that also more difficult in Europe than in Africa?
No, I think it's obviously still there. I mean, if you look, there was one female ESC president ever, one from the World Heart Federation, was obviously me. I think HFA never had a female president, if I'm not wrong. I cannot recall one. And so the facts clearly show that there is still inequity, there's no doubt. But I really think women have to learn. I mean, women have to be bolder. Women have to put themselves forward. I don't think it's the males specifically want to hold women back. I don't think they think in that direction. But I really think women, I think you must just not think so much about the barriers. Learn from me. I don't know what it is in my character, but I never think about the barrier. I just don't think in that direction. I never think what could stop me. I just think, how will I do it? And if it doesn't work, I think about another way. And I really, 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 really can just encourage women to try. You can only fail. There's only two options. You make it or you fail. And failing is not so bad.
I completely agree with you. I'm obviously much older than you are, but I mean, nothing is easy, but people have to be, women have to be also, a little more aggressive, I think, actually. Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that scientific societies can help in this regard with the inequities that are present? You've recently been the president of the World Health Federation. Can you tell more about this experience, in particular in relation to sex and gender-based inequities?
Yeah, I think the ESC is doing a lot. I mean, there is a leadership program within the ESC where Barbara Cassidy and many others are involved. And I think that's a very good initiative. I think at that stage, I'm not so much for quota. I really think you need to perhaps do more mentoring, encourage mentoring program, encourage leadership courses. Look at this, it is something women have to learn. It's not easy. And I see also people from different countries here just in the audience. I mean, if you think about at school, I mean, when you grow up as a young girl or little girl, preschool, I mean, you're supposed to be a nice girl when you are quiet and in the background and polite, and a little boy if you are rowdy and I know you're not supposed to beat somebody, but let's say you're good in rugby and in football and in whatever you're good. It's a good character. And even if you come home and you have a little boy punched one and the other one punched back, then everyone said, oh, okay, little boys. And just imagine if you're a little girl and you punch somebody and this girl punched back, it's, oh God, I mean, it's a crisis. So in many cultures, little girls are encouraged to be in the background. So how suddenly at work or in a cardiac society, you're supposed to be bold and upfront. I mean, how do you merge that? So so we have to counterbalance the expectations of a young girl from the society to the business world, where you need totally different skill set. And that is actually something which can be done by leadership program, by interactions, by how you are filmed, how you present something. There are skills how we can train that, and I think that's needed. I don't think we need quota. I don't think we need more scientific training. It's really the character where we need to encourage women to fit into the business world or in the society world, and very much for Southeast Asia, even more than, or for some other countries in, like Northern Europe or part of Africa. Yeah, and then within the World Heart Federation, again, it's there are more than when I was president. I obviously made sure we had more women now on the board and from different backgrounds. And there is now, if you look at 8 working groups, so you have a very mix of about 50 people in the various working groups. You have a very broad representation of people from different countries, and obviously I think more than half are female. So within one presidency, you can change it. I mean, you can without, I mean, there are so many excellent women. You will not struggle to find excellent women working in these committees. It's not lack of women, obviously not, but you need someone making, just by nominating the right people. I'm never using the quota system. You will very rarely hearing me, oh, we need a woman there. I mean, don't think I ever said that. It's just by putting name forward.
Well, now I'm totally convinced that you are unstoppable. But not only you, Karen, but also Anne. I can tell you Anne also is unstoppable.
Oh. I very much sympathize with what you say, Karen, actually. So.
Now, well, some interesting questions from the audience.
Yes.
One of the features of our dialogues is that really they are global questions from all over the world. And I'm sure you know that dialogue is a Greek word and was used a lot by Socrates, who believed that the dialogue is the way to reach the truth. And the dialogue today, I think, is really proving this concept. Now, I have a question from my friend, Eloisa Agustini from Italy, about the difference in heart failure between Europe and Africa. Etiologies, age of onset, outcomes, do you think there are substantial differences?
Yes, there are differences. I mean, first, I mean, there is several studies from Africa by now. CESUS study is the first, which was led by Prof. Damasceno and many others from Africa. And it showed that the age of diagnosing heart failure when the patients come to a hospital is about 2 decades younger. So it's 52 instead of 72 when you take the Euro Heart Failure Survey or other Western studies. So 2 decades earlier, so 52 is obviously the breadwinner generation. So heart failure in Africa has a very big impact on the society. And then the etiology is also different. I mean, you have still much lower percentage of ischemic heart disease. So if you take CESUS study, inter-CHF study, it's less than 10% have ischemic heart disease as a cause for heart failure. It's most common is hypertension, but then you have the big group of the so-called cardiomyopathies. Then you have rheumatic heart disease, a common cause for heart failure. And right heart failure is also much more common. as a contributor to admission for heart failure. And then you have peripartum cardiomyopathy. It's a condition 1 in 100 in northern Nigeria. It's obviously a common cause for heart failure, and endomyocardial fibrosis, and number of other conditions. So there's clearly a different age, younger, and a different factors.
Thank you, Karen, for clarifying this important issue. And then we have a question from Thomas Schindler. It's about anti-inflammatory treatment of heart failure. Infliximab didn't work. Do you think this is still an important line of investigation, also based on your personal experience in this field? What do you see in your pipeline?
Yes, I mean, the studies from Douglas Mann and colleagues were negative for inhibiting TNF-alpha for patients with heart failure was not beneficial. Probably at that time, it was too simplified to, if you look when those trials were done, it was different to this time because one lumped all patients with heart failure together, ischemic, idiopathic cardiomyopathy. They were not differentiated. And one focused on a total inhibition of TNF-alpha, which probably also wrong thinking at that time with the knowledge we have. So based on the data we have from studies which are 20 years old, one can clearly not give infliximab or a TNF-alpha inhibitor, but it would be really interesting to revisit this concept and see if you have lowering several cytokines to a lower level, but not totally inhibiting, potentially could have an effect in a more selective population group, let's say newly diagnosed cardiomyopathy. So I wouldn't close this chapter totally. I think it might be worthwhile revisiting that based on the much increased knowledge we have in this field at this time.
Well, we have a similar problem in ischemic heart disease. The inflammatory component is there. And the problem is the balance between immunomodulation without creating danger with very good results in terms of reduction of cardiovascular endpoints, but there is an increase in non-cardiac mortality. Is a balance to follow. So, but I think we are going in parallel with heart failure and ischemic heart disease. And then we have a question from a colleague from South Africa, Ganetso Sekome, and I am a South African citizen and PhD candidate at WITS. And he's interested in hypertension. And the question is, how can we collaborate? Well, I'm sure that he can for developing joint efforts. What can we tell our colleague?
Yes, he must just send me an email or WhatsApp message, and I would be happy to meet him and work with him. And I have a whole in my institute. I mean, we have now, more than 60 people. The easiest is if you would visit me, because I have the most brilliant PhD and master students. We are now 7 working groups, and there is definitely an area he could work with us and collaborate and be part of the network. We also have a weekly, very interesting research meeting where you can participate via Zoom every Wednesday from 9 to 10. So that's another option to look what different students are doing, because I truly believe I never give my students a topic. That's something else. They have to find their own topic. And they all are invited to spend a week here, meet the different groups, and then find something they find interesting and be passionate about. So that's just how I do research.
And then another question from Shamana Yenega. Well, the question is about the rheumatic fever in Africa. Any improvement, any step forward?
Yes, there is a big improvement. So there is actually for instance, in more affluent areas, let's say Cape Town or Soweto, we don't see rheumatic fever anymore because tonsillitis is treated. It's treated with antibiotics, and we still see rheumatic heart disease because it takes about 30, 40 years later, you still see people who had rheumatic fever. But in rural areas, let's say Mozambique, you still see patients with rheumatic fever. And there's a really interesting paper I can recommend. The first author is Jean Bookman. I was the second author. It's published in Lancet Global Health about the cost effectiveness of treatment of rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease. And it really shows where you have which problem and how to tackle it. So, but altogether, rheumatic fever becomes more rare.
And then, Karen, we have a question from Aimé Bonney. You know him? He's
yes, of course. Hello, Amy.
Our co-author, our co-editor.
Yes, he's a co-editor from Africa. Yes.
And the question is, he feels that ischemic heart disease is underestimated in Africa, because imaging techniques perhaps are less used as compared to Europe. Do you have the same feeling?
Yeah, it depends where you are. I mean, he's totally right that, for instance, I think a country like Malawi has only one cardiologist. It's not a very small country. So there are many, Mali has no cath lab. I mean, there are many countries who have less than 10 cardiologists and countries who don't have a cath lab. So then obviously the chance that you are not diagnosing it or missing it is extremely high. So I think he's totally right. On the other hand, I'm still surprised why a country like Nigeria, who is such an obese population, such a population with so much hypertension, is not seeing more. It should see more coronary artery disease. And my colleagues in Nigeria, there are some cath labs. So it's still an area where we still need more research to understand it better. But he's right. I'm sure in many areas it's also missed.
Well, I have a comment from Thomas Schindler. He asked before the question about anti-inflammatory treatment of HF, and he congratulates you for the excellent and thoughtful response. I'm trusting this message. Now, let's continue with science. So by now, we know that you are an unstoppable scientist, and I'm sure that you have interesting studies in your pipeline. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we all know about all the COVID pandemic and my passion about infectious diseases. So for me, it was scientifically a very good time because I could go back to my old passion. So I initiated via the World Heart Federation a large COVID trial which shows data from more than 5,500 patients in about 30 countries, but the global south. So this study is now in press. And we have now received funding from the WHO to do a COVID extension trial and also a long-term study. And again, the focus is on the countries where you hear very little, like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, obviously the African countries. So, and it's a younger population, as you know, and in many of the hospitals, you don't have ventilators. So I think the data are very interesting. So that's my one area where I will continue for the next 2-3 years. And then I still continue on postpartum cardiomyopathy. We have some very good proteomic data now. So that field I will still continue. And but I also want to learn more now about implementation research. After creating so many data, but how the data are used and how people take up medication, it's really something that's a new area I have to learn. And I know it's often not published as well, dear editor, but I think it is very important that we try to encourage more research and how we translate our research and studies, how we translate the tools, how we translate our research finding into practice. So that's my new area. I want to learn about it and I want to research that.
Well, your enthusiasm is contagious. Now, it's not a question, but really a nice comment coming from India, from Niveta Jha. And she says, dear Karen, it has been a very good and motivational talk for all of us, especially young women researchers like me from India. I think it is really a nice comment coming from a place far away from Europe and from South Africa.
Thank you. Thank you.
Final question. I always ask our guests, what are your suggestions to improve our dialogues or to improve the journal? What are your suggestions?
Yes, I mean, what I would suggest is that we have also a dialogue with enthusiastic younger people who have interesting ideas and moving forward. Because if you look at the age when people came up with their ideas and eventually got the Nobel Prize, you know, they were young. They were in their mid-20s often, in their early 30s. So I think we have to give a voice to young, bold people. They might have crazy ideas, and sometimes you might interview someone who has a stupid idea. But I think it is important to give them a voice and a platform. And there will be some. Look at the process at the ESC Congress. You will find people who stick out, and I think we should invite them to also be interviewed.
Well, yeah, I fully agree with you. I think that the part of our brain which produces crazy ideas is the most important part of the brain. So we should exploit this opportunity. Well, I have another comment from Royben Mutagaigwa, who says, great talk, Professor Karen. So really,
thank you.
Globally very well received. Well, it has been 1 hour of dialogue.
Yes, I can see that.
Conversation looks like 1 minute, but it has been 1 hour. I thank you, Karen, for this opportunity offered to all of us. Thank you, Anne, for hosting Karen. And I remind our audience that, as usual, we don't stop, not even in July in Europe, end of July. But no, the next will be end of June, but also we'll have at the end of July. We are unstoppable like you.
That's good.
And,
that's good.
Our next dialogue will be on the last Thursday of June, June 30th at 17 CET. Thank you again for this wonderful hour, Karen and Anne.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you at future dialogues, always on the last Thursday of every month. Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Nancy. Bye, everybody. Bye. Okay.
So Karen and Anne, we'll just wait for people to sign off.
Yes.
See a lot of the thank yous in the chat.
I can see lots of chats and lots of comments. So many questions.
Yeah, no time for all of them, but
yes.
welcome them.
And bye, Nancy from China. Bye, Tian Fouché.